Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I can go.
Sure.
Hi everyone, Yasmin here. So I haven't, yeah, I think my perspective comes from even trying to be a part of these kind of roundtable conversations. Because I think a thing that stands out for me is where is the organization rooted in being kind of an arts organization of color versus kind of shifts in mission and shifts in leadership and work. So, for example, the organization that I'm with, apart from kind of everything I do, has been around for 20 years under like three different names. And it really has been in the most recent last couple of years with shift in leadership, shift in, the kind of the community spaces that we're in, that the focus has, grown to be more predominant for BIPOC communities
Okay.
and wanting to uplift the communities that haven't been represented in years before in the organization. So
Mhm.
thinking about like when looking at these parameters, I was like, yes, this still fits
Okay.
what we're doing here. But I
Excellent.
guess a question back is that a valid applicant? And if not, what needs to be reworded then?
Okay. To what, I mean, what would be more inclusive in your mind? What do you think would be more accurate than representing the groups you serve?
No, well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying
Oh,
as of now, I felt like I would like this organization would still qualify
okay.
because of this. And I'm like,
Gotcha.
as long as it feels like it is in par with it, then I think that sounds good. If
Okay.
it feels like the need is more on organizations that have been doing the work since the beginning, no matter how long it's been around,
Hmm.
then it needs that rewording. So I think it kind
Okay.
of depends on how strict it wants to be.
Okay. And Suba, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, that's Yasmin, thank you for that. I think I've been struggling with these they feel very external in a certain way, and I think that's part of what I'm struggling with because I'm not sure if I can find good words. Um, an organization can have all of these three things and possibly not have a root that is deep enough in what I see, what I see you're hoping for, which is a non-Western, the current structures, the current nonprofit structures. That's what I'm thinking and hearing, and these feel very externally. Yeah, it feels a little external. That's where I'm at, and maybe I'll try and come with an example. I don't mean to be harsh, but a organization that perhaps does um performance art that we know as let's say white centered, or is very much in sort of in the Western world, could be led by a person of color, could be
Hmm.
predominantly in
Right.
service of all these folks,
Hmm. Hmm.
who do not look
Hmm.
white, and could be founded by and for a community of color, but
Right.
still be doing
Mm.
um,
Okay.
a very
Hmm.
familiar old school type of
Hmm.
artistic practice. So
Okay.
again, I apologize that I don't
No,
have,
don't, please.
that's
No,
where
I
I'm,
appreciate very much that idea. Okay.
and
Okay.
it's also this idea of education. We
Hmm.
talk about education, Fawn, you're talking about education. I resonate with, I think, that idea of education, but when we think about education in certain cultures, it becomes a part of the way we are, and
Hmm.
art is education, as opposed to how education gets thrown around, I think, in certain communities where it becomes another way to exclude certain folks.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
I'm
Okay.
curious what this will bring about, but yeah.
Right. No, I appreciate that because I've also seen the inverse where the programming is for communities of color, but it's led by a white person. So then what? You know what I mean? So I totally understand what you're saying, and I think that needs to be addressed, and that's something, we need to think about a little bit. So thank you for that.
Maybe I'm thinking and, right? Not
Yes,
as
yes.
opposed to, right?
Okay.
Like these
Sure.
feel, the external things are helpful, but
Hmm.
maybe there's some kind of
Okay.
it, there's a foundation
Sure.
of
Okay. to capture the spirit of the work. I think that's, you know, an interesting thing to think about. Like, how do you create a definition that captures the spirit of the work, you know, because yes, okay, I'm with you. So we will figure that out and condense that answer and capture that. So let's keep going with the next question is
Can I
the
add
less, please. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
I was just going to add that I think I actually have a question on the
Sure.
definition of arts organization.
Okay.
I'm in an area of Oregon, you know, Sue was in Portland. I do a little bit more in Washington County, which is kind of the suburbs outside of Portland. We don't have very many set established arts organizations of color that are predominantly producing, performing, or having art space. But we do have a lot of cultural organizations that have arts departments or programming.
Mhm.
So is it that to be an arts organization, you need to have arts in your mission statement? Or, you know, do you have to be an actively producing organization? Or, you know, can you have arts education or arts department under your work? Because I know that would exclude like a lot of people in our area that don't have, you know, actual arts organizations.
I'm going to ask Anika to respond to that question, if that's okay. Anika, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say like, thanks for that. It's noted. Remembering like we're still in development, so this kind of feedback will help to inform, you know, us, you know, being really clear about those kinds of things.
Yes.
So thanks for that. That there's a need in that space. So thanks for that, Yasmin.
And in terms of the arts education component too, I think what may help us, I think, craft this is about who the audiences are that you're serving. Like, what are the communities involved? So it's not necessarily who's doing the work as much as who's receiving the work, that combination of those two things. So that's something that we need to think about too in terms of developing language for this, you know, this work. So thank you. So let's go to the next question about budget. Is the less than $500,000 operating expense budget limit appropriate for supporting smaller arts organizations of color in your region? And if so, in what ways? And if not, how can this more accurately capture operating expense budget, you know, concerns for these groups?
I'd jump in and say, I think for Oregon, it feels like 500 and below makes a lot of sense.
Okay, excellent.
We have a lot of what we would call small and even think of them as mid-sized organizations and organizations of color that really do effective work on a small budget. And then the next leap becomes large. So yeah, that's what I would say. I don't know, Yasmin, your thoughts, of course.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think especially having it with, I think you said it was 3 years of programming pre-applying, correct?
I believe so.
Something like that. Yeah, just having kind of that history of
3 years of programming history. Yes.
Of programming before. I think, yeah, that aligns with a lot of the work we're seeing in this area.
Excellent. Okay, Fawn and Gio, what do you think?
You know, I'm immediately thinking, and we're just talking about, you know, just kind of free-flowing ideas
Yes,
here,
absolutely.
correct, about just how we feel about things. I asked a colleague not too long ago about, you know, what is the goal? Like they were doing this fish fry event, for example, as a community event. It was really beautiful and awesome. And I asked the leader, I was like, you know, what is your goal? Like for, you know, fundraising tonight or just the goal? And she looked at me in my eyes. She's like, $1 million.
Wow.
And I'm like,
Okay.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, why not? Why are we always thinking like, okay, we can make this stretch, or hopefully we get this $5,000 grant or 10 or, you know, whatever. Like, you know what, we could make so much happen and we'll just really pull our time and ourselves apart to really make this, you know, happen. But, you know, why aren't we looking at bigger goals? Why aren't we, you know, thinking, you know, in those terms and in that scope of really dreaming about the future? Like, no, okay, this would be great if we can work with this. And of course, you know, we're POC, we'll always work with this. But
Absolutely.
if we could just dream and envision, you know, something bigger, what else can we do if we did have $1 million, $2 million, some kind of endowment? You know, what does that look like? What does the future look like in our communities if we actually just dreamed bigger?
Thank you. Okay. Gio, your thoughts?
I think the the 500 looked like a lot to me, but from hearing
Okay.
everybody else, it seems like it's not that much. I'm not like part of a nonprofit. I actually work for the county here, and we get a lot of funding ourselves as a government organization. But yeah, I think the 500 is fine there. I didn't see any like issues with it.
Okay. So it feels accurate. I mean, like
Yeah.
as a sort of a bar for that category. Okay. Are there
25 minutes.
Please. I'm sorry, go ahead. Someone.
This is our 20, we are at 25 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Are there additional eligibility criteria you think would be beneficial to consider?
This is like rough draft
Yeah.
version of what I'm thinking, just to kind of get out there in terms of time. I'm really interested in components around kind of community engagement and community
Okay.
support.
Yes.
Whether it's like the people they're directly serving, whether that's letters of support. I know letters of support are always an interesting thing when working with grants. It feels a little, I mean, like people half look at them, half don't.
Right.
I'm also just thinking about it in the sense of, you know, if organizations are applying that maybe aren't doing the work in the community and kind of, you know, keeping things a little more siloed and their resources siloed, like how do we prioritize people that are actually going to be, you know, using the resources, using the funds to actively work with the community and ensuring that they already have that audience and connection as well, even if it's at a minimal base, but ensuring that they're already on the ground doing work.
Okay. Okay. Now what about, in your opinion, are there any gaps in the program design that could prevent deserving organizations from applying? Is there something glaring that's omitted here?
Well, I mean, it's not omitted, but I think the question around capacity is always there, right?
Okay.
How do applicants, how can they say that, yes, we're deserving, but we're only made up of one person who's doing all the work?
Right.
I think, you know, WESTAF, if it's coming out of WESTAF, I think many small arts organizations feel like, oh, this is a large funder. And when folks think about large funders, they just assume that they have to show up in a certain way. So I think that is the kind of barrier I think about as how can that gap be reduced? How can comfort be provided so that organizations don't have a tension of, oh crap, if I don't show you a proper budget with all the right words of assets and liabilities and stuff, you know, I'm just thinking about how it will be presented in a way that already says, no, we're not going to give you barriers. We just want to know what you need this for.
So how do you think an organization that doesn't function by those strict kind of ratios in order to provide capacity, a clear capacity, you know, component, should represent that in a proposal? Like, you know, I hear what you're saying, and I'm just trying to figure out how to enable them to complete that information, because we do need to know, but at the same time, what's the fair way of asking that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I don't know, right? Because the other part is also, if only 2 organizations from every state is going to end up getting funding, that's already a barrier right there. Because someone who's maybe $150,000 or $75,000 annual budget is going to be like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to compete for this. So that curiosity of, you know, what's next, like maybe there's an understanding of not feeling like maybe this is data collection. That's the other thing that organizations think about, like, oh, you want me to apply just so that you know how many arts organizations of color exist in my state, when there are only 2 organizations who are going to get.
Well, you know, speaking to that point, though, do you think it's better to introduce the idea of stratifying and like this many, you know, you're considering this many from this price point, you know what I mean? So that you can fairly represent all those different price points within a state. So it isn't just those that are well-funded or that have large capacities. You know what I mean? I hear what you're saying, but I'm wondering how to accurately represent that in so that those organizations that are small don't feel like this is a waste of time for me to apply. Right? That's what we don't want them to feel. It is just as likely that you will be able to get funded as this very large organization that has much larger capacity, you know? So that's the issue that I think you've raised. Please, Gio, you had a question. Your hand raised.
Yeah, just to go along with that, would it be helpful? I think you used the word stratifying, right? Like creating tiers for different level, different size organizations. And I guess that kind of goes back to my kind of concern of grassroots being left out. Pretty familiar with the WESTAF's like Artists of Color Fund. I feel like that's the questions aren't too demanding. I feel like they're kind of straightforward and they ask you simple questions that don't feel too like you have to have a lot of knowledge or you have to have a professional grant writer to answer. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I feel like something like that would be very helpful, like that layout and that type of rigor with those questions, like very low.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, Anika has a question. Would you mind defining what you see as grassroots? How do you see that word represented?
And then after that, Gio, sorry, then I saw Manny had a hand up earlier. So after Gio.
Yeah, for sure. So when I think of grassroots, I think of like just collectives of people that are getting together to do kind of smaller work that maybe nonprofits do, but aren't as focused. So I've had there's this grassroots organization in my community. They're called Fifth Sun Project, and they raise funds to support local vendors. So that's something they do. It's very like it's very specific, their goals, but they don't have that nonprofit status either because they don't have the money to gain that accreditation, or they just don't know how, but they do know how to provide help for the community. So that I guess that answers your question. That's how I would define grassroots, just not having those those titles, those certificates, or yeah.
Thank you. And Manny, you had your hand raised, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Manny. I'm a little sick if I get out, it's because of that. But I would just wanted to add on to what Suba was saying. I think adding some inviting language or something that makes it known when people are looking at this program that they are welcome to even consider applying. I know that the 500,000 number on paper might look daunting, but maybe adding some additional language that, makes it like almost guarantees that you will at least be considered if you apply, no matter what your capacity is. And just making the language a little bit more accessible. Which I think it's somewhat accessible, but even the fact that you read part of like a grant text is already kind of like uncomfortable for some people that might not be experienced in that world of like applying for funding and stuff.
Do you think it requires some sort of, primer or a webinar? I mean, like, I know that's adding more complications, but I do wonder if that offers some sort of, reduction in barrier where everyone can come ask questions at a certain session and then you proceed to the next, does that offer a way of equalizing the playing field a little bit? I mean, is that what you're thinking, or?
I mean, I think what we're doing now is already kind of part of that. I think it's a good, I've never really seen that in other grant applications and funding. But maybe just making that application accessible to more people in some language that, because I also don't want you guys to exert, extra funding for like marketing or stuff that could be used elsewhere for that. I don't know. I'm also
Did I hear you I just want to
Sorry.
make sure I'm clarifying. Did you suggest that it be offered in different languages?
So that's a great example of
Yes,
something that would increase
absolutely
accessibility,
right.
especially for people of color.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much
Mhm.
for that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely right. Okay. Appreciate that. So let's go to application process itself. And again, if you think of something else that you'd like to bring up, by all means, come back to it. Okay. How would a two-part application process, and that would entail screening plus the full application, be the most efficient approach for both applicants and WESTAF?
We are at 15 minutes, Yvonne.
Thank you. Okay. So do we have 5 minutes left for this? About?
We have 15 minutes left.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. So I'm sorry, let me ask that again. How would a two-part application process, which would entail screening plus the full application, be the most efficient approach for both applicants and WESTAF?
I can speak on both the granting process and
Sure.
grants receiving process because I've been a
Sure,
part
sure.
of both.
Mhm.
I have found a lot of ease with having a little bit of a two-part application
Okay.
process, having that kind of simple. I think it also helps with a little bit of that dauntingness
Mhm,
of
mhm.
like, okay, all my eggs are in one basket with this
Yes,
one
it's
big
one shot.
application.
Yeah, right.
Gets really scary. So I mean, I'm definitely a fan of a two-part. I will throw in two of just like when thinking about accessibility and things that make things obviously, I'm sure you will be expecting a lot of applications, so this might not be the most feasible for this grant, but I've worked with a couple of grants that have started allowing video submissions as well.
Right. And we
And
were
not
talking
having,
about that too. So
oh,
thank you.
perfect.
Yes.
But yes,
Okay. Okay.
I'll stop there.
Good, good. Okay. Excellent. No, please don't stop. I didn't mean that by any means. But no, I appreciate that. And how has that been received? How are people finding that process of using the video submission? How's that going?
It's been really well received. I think because we've also just really stipulated that, it doesn't have to be direct or high quality, like,
Okay.
use your
Okay.
phone, even when thinking about kind of a webinar or something before and
Okay.
getting people preps, even showing like a basic example of like this is
Okay.
how low tech it needs to be.
Right.
I do think that are people that are really good with writing and there are people that are
Mhm.
really good with vocal communication.
Sure.
So having those two avenues, I think also deals a lot with accessibility.
And are those folks also offered prompts, like much like you would in a written application that they have to respond to in the video or whatever?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it. Thank you. Thank you. Someone else wanted to respond to that? The the idea of the two-part application process? How do you feel about that?
I just would chime in and say, I think that's great because
Okay.
it allows, I think that's maybe another access point for folks who feel like they don't have the capacity as
Okay.
I'm thinking about it, right? It's a way to
Mhm.
just provide your thoughts and then you can think more when it's needed. The
Mhm.
video parts are great. We have several organizations and the prompts are really helpful. 3 minutes to talk about X,
Yes.
4 minutes to
Okay.
talk about
Okay.
Y.
Good.
It's really helpful.
Yes.
Because it also prevents, those who are talking from just feeling like they have to talk forever about something.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else? Gio or Fawn? We
Um,
have a new person. Welcome. AB,
I
I see you as AB.
I think the two, like the
Okay.
screen, and sounds fine. I do like Yasmin's like take on the having video, and
Okay.
yeah, some people are better at writing, some
Mhm.
people are better like at speaking. Um, so I think that's a great idea, and I feel like you could do maybe if you don't do the writing or video, you could have the screening be a video and then the full part be writing or vice versa.
Okay. Thank you. Fawn, did you have something you wanted to add?
When it comes to the two-part application, like screening and full application, isn't that what WESTAF is currently doing though? Like the not really
Mhm.
screening, but looking at, who have been like the past the POC people, the artists of color for WESTAF, part of these different programs, like being able to like be in this amazing cohort. Is that what you mean by the screening? And maybe I'm not fully understanding that, but I am a little slower to reply when I hear other people's answers. Like, oh, okay, that's it. I understand now.
Okay, well, let's ask Anika to clarify what screening is for WESTAF.
Yeah, thanks, Fawn. So part one is meant to just, and I really appreciate all this feedback. It's very affirming, but also open to like, no, that's not gonna work. Our goal is that we can learn about organizations and, make sure that we have a representative spread of organizations across the region. But then we don't want to create this huge burden of asking all of these questions. Let me close my door here. Oh, having an organization answer all these narrative questions, and then only to find out that they're not even gonna really get the ratio, because we have so many applications and you put all this effort in. We'd rather organizations, be able to answer questions that are pretty straightforward for them, their mission, who they serve, some information about them, and be able to submit that. And then we're screening, we're checking your eligibility based on what you've presented us, and then we're able to go from there. And then we're sharing the part two process even during the part one. So there's no gotcha moments.
Right.
We want you to know upfront like what's expected. So that's what we're talking about in terms of part one and part two. Part one is more numbers and things, and part two, if invited back for part two, is more a deeper kind of narrative questions in that.
Okay, thank you, Anika. Does that help, Fawn? Perfect. Okay, well, that's a good lead into the next question, which is what types of information would be most helpful to gather in the first part of the application process to determine eligibility? Based on what, Anika just talked about. What do you think about that? What types of information would be most helpful to gather in the first part of the application process to determine eligibility? What do you think needs to be put forward? Yes, please, AB.
Hello, my name is AB Wilkinson. I'm representing IAF or Indigenous AF here in Las Vegas. It's good to see a lot of people, familiar faces, and see new faces or meet new people in the room. Really like some of the things that people have been saying so far, and gets me thinking about just where we're at as a nonprofit organization, and maybe tiering. I put this in the chat too, maybe tiering organizations in that first portion and saying, well, what's their operating budget, or how much are they bringing in a year? Because I know when we started off as a nonprofit, I think we considered ourselves grassroots, and it's interesting and good to hear Gio's comments about what he considers grassroots, and how people or orgs identify, because now we're operating above 30K, but I've seen some other applications. I don't know why 30K is a number, but maybe that's what I've seen elsewhere. And then kind of mid-tier up to 100K, but then once a organization is making 6 figures or more, something like that, or seeing if they've got hired personnel. I know our board is a working board, and we have no paid employees now. Though we do have interns, and that was kind of a move for us. So we went from, probably below 30K, all volunteer, to now we're over 30K, but under 100K, but have interns, but no permanent employees. So as some people have said as well, if you've got, one or a few people working in the room on these applications, it's a lot more daunting than when you have paid staff and maybe you have over 100K, and maybe kind of just figuring that out earlier in the first round, and then seeing where to kind of position groups in terms of eligibility.
Yeah, I think this is an important point you're raising, AB. Thanks for that. Because, for example, if you were to do a screening process and you were to, kind of push on what types of information would be most helpful to gather, if your organization doesn't have employees, paid employees, that, under typical circumstances, that would make it seem as though it doesn't have the capacity to serve, right? So maybe it's about addressing how the audiences are served or how the groups, if you don't have paid employees, then how is that work accomplished? You know what I mean? Maybe there is a way to offer a prompt to encourage organizations like yours to be able to answer that question in a way that doesn't make it seem like you don't have people working toward that goal. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out a way to capture, like, again, it's about capturing the spirit of the work that's being done in these groups when it isn't necessarily formal or captured in the traditional way like Gio was talking about. So, this is very helpful. Suba, you have...
Yeah, I just to add to fun and complication, maybe there are two types of first tier questioning. Like maybe it can come from a simple question that says, is your annual expenses below $150,000 or between 150 and 500,000? I don't know. I'm just coming up with the number that, the the organizations I work with think about these numbers. And if it's less than 150, maybe the questions are less.
Okay.
And they are asking that are, so it's do you have full-time, part-time, volunteers, few sentences as to what that means. So impact. So then you're just asking for 3 questions, maybe for the 150 folks, which is, what is your purpose? What is your annual work? What are your hopes and dreams? Versus, I mean, I don't know, like a good way to.
I get it. Yeah, you're right.
And then the larger maybe has a little bit more to ask.
Yeah. Okay.
So I want to just jump in with a question because this is really great. And one of the reasons why we have you divided by state or jurisdiction is to like see where the nuances are, and we'll see over the next days as we do these roundtables. But what AB, you and Suba are bringing is really interesting from the point of view, like right now, WESTAF, we've leaned into when we, for example, Tour West or any other grant program, we try to look at Montana for Montana, Wyoming for Wyoming, so on and so on, because obviously a California will have, resources across the state that will not match that of a Wyoming. And so I'm wondering about now, like to the point of if they have, that there could potentially be a group that is volunteer based. And those are, and we are making, decisions about, we're going to make sure we have X number across of volunteer based or, these kinds of things. And I guess a question I have in all the other things that you all and AB, I was really, really leaning into what you were saying. I don't want to make assumptions, but when we talk about capacity, we're talking about, up to 2 grants per state or jurisdiction, and that works out to about 34,000 each. If it were a volunteer organization that had a budget of, 30,000, I'm just wondering if there's opportunity to even split that more if the capacity might be different, or the percentage of one's budget, or what you could do with a 15,000, right, as an organization might be, substantial for you, and that could help us to do more in one state. So I just want to throw that. If I'm off base, please tell me.
And just as an FYI, everyone, we are at time. So I wanted to honor everyone's time, so we could go ahead and get that break in. Is that all right, Anita?
Yeah, can we answer that and then do the break? Is that okay? And can we do 5 minutes, or y'all want to do 10 minutes?
5 is good for me, but I'd leave it up to our community. If I can, Annika, I can answer one thing about, I don't know if every state has the same statistics, right? In Oregon, I can say that we have at least 3 foundations. We've got the Oregon Arts Commission, we've got the Oregon Community Foundation, and the Miller Foundation, all of whom give small operating grants, which are mostly, I think it's all 150 and below, right? Yasmin, I always forget, or maybe 75 and below, I can't remember. And then and then operating grants for medium-sized organizations that are between that and 500, because there are a ton of organizations who are impactful in our state below that $150,000 mark. So I don't know if that is true for all states. And I don't know if there's a possibility for screening that each state has a different screening. So just being honest about what I know about our state, and it could look different for other states. So thanks for that great question there.
Yes, Yasmin.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm kind of missing right now, and I don't know if that's kind of part of what we're working on defining or there's a little more of a set description, is when we're talking about cultural sustainability, are we more awarding organizations with the potential of development, or are we more awarding organizations with their history of engagement and what they've done? Because I feel like that kind of creates two different routes. Because when thinking about, I think it was $34,000 is what we're looking at. I'm not sure if that would be a one-time payment and then still involved in the cohort, or would it be divided up into two-part payments? But then when looking at kind of what questions we're asking, right now, I mean, I think most of the grants are really looking at like, what are new things you're trying to do? And how are you going to spend this money on new things? When sometimes the focus maybe should be more on what's already existing and just giving them an extra push.
Sure. And I think to your point, I mean, think about the pandemic and those, organizations that sprouted up to address the needs of the communities post-pandemic, which wouldn't hold water if you were trying to address those needs prior to that time, yet they've been established. So those new organizations did need to come to the fore at that time, and that makes sense. So I hear what you're saying. And how do we capture that again in these sorts of, in this application process? So thank you. Is this a good time for everyone?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take that 5-minute break. Please be back at 5:38 or whatever after the 38 mark is at your time.
Thank you.
And the rich conversation, we're going to jump back in, and Yvonne is going to start at the technical assistance questions. We want to really hear about needs, capacity-based, and your community and so on.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming back. Hope you had a good break. We're talking about technical assistance and support. So let's begin with, what are the most pressing capacity building needs you see among arts organizations of color in your region? Think about those top 3 things. What do you keep hearing about? What do you keep hearing about repeatedly that we need to do something about? What's urgent?
So what I hear over here, artists don't have much support in like where to show work. There's plenty, maybe not plenty, not as much as some other cities at like our size, but there's a good amount of galleries. But I don't know, I always think of Las Vegas, where I'm from, as very not clicky, but I don't know what other word to use, but like it's very segmented in the groups. There is some kind of cross-pollination, I guess, but everybody stays to their own stuff. But yeah, there's not that many places for people to show work, and exhibitions do stay up for a while, so times kind of change.
Interesting. No, is this mainly visual arts you're talking about? Or
yeah, I am
mainly
in I'm a visual artist, and those are usually the artists that we work with. So yeah, thank you for
no, just wanted to make sure I understand.
These are mostly visual artists. And so besides space to show, another space issue that we have is like studio space. So that's something I'm seeing from artists and our organization. Like right now we're currently funding money so we could have our own space. And as we put on our application, we are like more of a fiscal kind of sponsored type of group. We have been in contact with like other nonprofits, talking about that. But yeah,
And so it's about showing, I mean, so are there cross collaborations happening with like coffee shops and like other venues where people gather, you know, are those things happening, or is that something that needs to be addressed somehow? And
yeah, we've been thinking about, like personally, I'm really into alternative spaces for showing work. But that is also like a money issue.
Yes.
Some places, if they're renting just a space, it like right now we're looking at a space that's gonna cost $1,500 for about like a little less than a month to show. So it's a lot of money, especially with the real estate changing here in Las Vegas. Yeah, those are the big issues. We also have a little side project where we redistribute art supplies that people donate. So that has been an issue as well, just access to supplies. But we're doing fairly well with that. Like we've been pretty popular, so I'm happy with that. But yeah, the bigger issue that we're seeing from visual artists is having space to either show or to work.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? What are the issues? Most pressing capacity building needs you see? Suba.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of the need for affordable space for sure. This is both performing and visual. We don't have a lot of theater spaces that are either affordable or the right sizes, for example, for the kind of work we want to do. Because I would say, and Yasmin and I, we live in sort of similar worlds in the arts world. So I'm curious, but different counties, right? But there is that question that, so affordability of space, and then the welcome, and there's also the question about ethos. You could be welcome into a space, but you're only welcome for 5 weeks of the year, and then you're no longer needed until whenever they feel like, you know, they want to host you again in that space. So the freedom to have space to do the work that organizations want to do, that's one big thing. We hear a lot about visibility, that there's so much that's happening, and there's so many organizations and collectives that are doing great work, but the visibility in something like the media or in the greater Oregon sense is always sucked up by the traditional arts organizations. And also advocacy. We don't get a seat at the table, is what I hear often in the spaces where, and when I talk about advocacy, it also becomes legislators, right? Being at the table so that we're seen as the ones who should be a part of the discussion of where monies come and where things, how things should be separate. Yeah. So I would stop there, but those are kind of three big things that.
Very big things. Yeah. I'm, you know, by all means give more, but top 3 things might be a good way to start. Thank you, Siva. Anyone else? What are those pressing things? Yasmin, I saw you. Yes.
Yeah, definitely agree with space. The biggest thing, in terms of kind of private versus public, also so many galleries that, you know, that close by 5 when a lot of our working class that we want to reach out to. You know, we have our first Ballet Folklorico Academy in the county that has their own renting space. This is the first time a Ballet Folklorico company has had one. But when they're looking at their spring summer performance, which is their main revenue source, they have to pay like thousands of dollars for a space. And, you know, they're trying to keep tickets affordable for families to actually come and see them. So definitely that monetary component. I mean, obviously, I think funding is a bigger conversation. You know, we're seeing, Suba knows as well, organizations in Oregon either changing some funding priorities, moving away from the arts, quote unquote. We also are seeing one of our primary organizations currently dissolve at the moment, little by little, as the city of Portland has pulled funding from them. So also just the conversation of how to talk about arts as a budget and monetary investment with city and governance in a way that like is
Okay.
more conversational. I actually just got off the phone earlier today with Washington County representatives talking about our budget. We received some county funding for the year. Obviously, it was reduced, and their excuses, it's everything's being reduced. But one of the things that I've been slowly starting to pitch to them is how do we start seeing arts funding as not its own bucket, but
Yeah.
rather a percentage of all the other county priorities. So a certain
Yeah.
percentage in housing developments and low
Yes, there is precedence for that work. So if we need to talk about that, I have models that have worked in other states.
Yeah.
I know this isn't part of this conversation, but
No, but I would love to follow up on that
as a
because
resource. Yeah.
just like yeah, I think not just funding in itself, but also the conversation around funding.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Top 3 pressing things that you keep hearing over and over and over. Yes. Oh, Fawn, did you? Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
you're
it's all in the
typing something.
chat, just, you know, affordability, rental space, ownership of space.
Okay.
Second, the ability to sustain independent artists, and third is cultural sustainability. And all of those things are really the goals that we had and we still have, you know, with the Nubu Arts and Activism Studios. And we have space for artists. You know, one of the things that we looked at is that artists can't afford, you know, to be in, like, let's say the arts district. I mean, years ago, I was looking at this space at the Arts Factory, and this closet size space was over 1,000 plus,
Wow.
you know, for a very
Yeah.
small area. And so when me and my partner went into, you know, building our spaces, just we really, you know, took a synagogue and the rabbi's home and the mikveh in the back, and we transformed it into these art studio spaces.
That's
And we
amazing.
have people who are, you know, doing their art there, you know, currently. And when we look at it, we look at, well, how can we sustain the artists though? You know, we have the artists who make the things, but do we have the artists who are selling the things? You know, like
Okay.
let's say in the arts district, you know, there aren't many artists or people of color that are right there. And a lot of it is changing too.
So the
Yeah.
life cycle, I'm hearing support of the life cycle of the artist's work. So space to begin the work, space to conduct the work, you know, in terms of marketing and like promoting and all that kind of stuff, as well as at the end of the work, right? Like selling it or having a place to display or exhibit. Like I'm seeing that life cycle kind of documented here as something that needs to be supported. That I appreciate that. Anyone else have another thing they'd like to add? Am I missing? I want to make sure I capture all that nuance. This is important. And if you think of something again, please add it to the chat or bring it back up again. But let's talk now about what topics or skill sets would be most beneficial to cover in the technical assistance component. What do you think would be most helpful to cover in the technical assistance component?
So just to frame while y'all are, you know, pulling thoughts together, right? And if you saw on the slide deck, we are having, our intention at this point is to have quarterly cohort sessions, is to virtual, is to have check-ins with you all, what that might look like to be in support of you, again, virtual. And then these communities of practice retreats that are in person, that are a combination of, you know, what problem. So let's say you all were in a cohort, sub cohort together, all wanting to focus on issues of space and across Nevada and Oregon. And so that's the, you know, problem of practice that you want to move the needle on. And so those, and in addition to having those conversations and working together on that in a way that makes sense for you, there's also wellness built into. That's why we're using the word retreat and not conference or convening or anything else. It's meant to be a retreat. So these are kind of the different things that we are thinking about planning, but you know, I wanted to layer that with Yvonne's next question. So over to y'all.
Thank you. So how important is it for the technical assistance to be tailored to the specific needs of each participating organization? So it kind of goes together with the previous question, which was what topics or skill sets would be most beneficial to cover in the technical assistance? And is it important that those topics be tailored to the organization. What do you think about that? Those two things.
I'm happy to start out.
Yeah, please.
You know, my organization, I run a residency program for choreographers, and I've begun asking them what kind of technical skills they need. In the performing arts, I'm learning that things like how to go on tour, what does it mean, and then how to relate, how to build even a tour system.
Okay.
You know, is a question that I hear, and it's touring within the region, right? We have a city, Portland, but then Yasmin's in Washington County, which is right next door, but it feels like it's a whole different place sometimes. So the idea of touring within the state and then touring across. So is there a way to think about networking across our WESTAF 16 states to build sustainability for the arts organizations of color? That's one thing I think about. And then the other thing that often comes up, I think that, what is it? The technical term would be something like strategic planning, right? People talk about strategic planning, but it's not the way that strategic planning gets done in the regular nonprofit world. There is a craving for what does strategic planning look like if we bring our own senses of tradition and culture and ways of living to think about sustainability. So what does it mean? Almost like technical assistance, but it's dismantling the regular definitions of what we think about as technical assistance. Because then I think it honestly empowers arts organizations of color to build a whole new way of being. And then the last thing I would say is board membership and board development. Like how can we all be empowered? I'm on boards, but the amount of work one has to do as a person of color on boards at the moment is, I'm gonna leave it as interesting. But how can we support the next generation of arts leaders of color to be able to be part of boards and be empowered to be completely ourselves and not have to keep reminding people that we're in the room? Okay, I'm gonna shut up now.
No, don't. Right on. Okay, I hear you. Anyone else?
I would just add, I love kind of the networking development skills and what it works to work and collaborate together. You know, no need to reinvent the wheel. Like, what's the importance of finding key partners, especially when only 2 organizations are receiving the funding? You know, how can you make that resource reach others, even if it's not directly monetary? Oh, I had another one and I'm blanking. It's okay. I'll come back to it. But the third one I was just going to say is a thing I keep hearing a lot is kind of marketing and communications. I feel like there's been a lot of trend changes in terms of social media or communications methods, especially post-COVID. So just like, like what should organizations be doing on social media or email? What's the most up-to-date information on that?
Sure. And how do
I'll
you
type the other one when I remember.
Oh, please do. Okay. Thank you for those. I'm going to go to the next one. And please, if you have more to say about this topic, please come back to it. On impact and sustainability, in your view, what are the biggest challenges arts organizations of color face in achieving long-term sustainability?
I might say beyond the obvious, right? Financial. So let's put that there. And what else?
Yes.
One thing that comes to mind, and I don't know the best way to frame this, but I feel like sometimes what I hear a lot is just kind of internal competition and comparison. That I feel like sometimes, whether it's big funders or donors, it's kind of easy to say, oh, we're going to support this Latinx organization and we're going to support this, Native Indigenous organization, and kind of feel that proudness of like, okay, we have one. But at the same time, they're supporting, 10 white owned gallery spaces, and those amounts are limited. So again, I don't know how to frame that as, but just a challenge of tokenism and
representation.
reflected as one.
Okay. Thank you. How can grant programs like cultural sustainability best support these organizations in achieving financial stability and growth? How can grant programs like cultural sustainability best support these organizations in achieving financial stability and growth? Yes, I see you, Gio. Sorry.
You're muted.
Thank you. This was more for the previous question.
Oh, okay, sure.
So I would want to add that rest is and like burnout.
Yes.
You like if you can't sustain a year of like just working a lot without the support, that's your group organization's definitely not gonna make it long term. It's really hard when you can't find time to do rest. And then another issue that I think I see from a lot of orgs would be reach, or like how to market
Dissemination of
themselves.
the work. Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Okay.
kind of really making sure that communities that they're helping know that they are there to help.
So is it marketing as well as the end product being pushed out? So I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, I would say both marketing,
Okay.
because if the people that need your help don't know you exist and you don't know how to reach them, there's like a big disconnect
Right.
there.
Sure.
And I
Absolutely
do
right.
see that happening a lot where these orgs are like, or groups are working, and they're just not reaching their people. So they're like, oh, okay, I guess nobody needs this help. And yeah.
Okay. So it's about that alignment. So it is a part of a marketing plan. It is part of an outreach. It is part of, it's multiplicity of those kinds of things to facilitate the word getting out properly.
Yeah, a lot
And
of
that's going to vary, right? Depending on what kind of BIPOC audience you're dealing with. It could be through ethnic markets, it could be through temples. And so it really depends. And you can't, one size does not fit all.
Okay, so
we know
we
this.
are at a little less than 20 minutes. So just to fast track a little bit, I put the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions in the chat. What is standing out for you in terms of what needs to be discussed out of those 5? And you can jump in and start talking about it. I know you're taking a minute to read them.
I just want to own up to feeling slightly overwhelmed by the speed at which this is going. So I'll do my best. And if each of the region, I'm just wondering how each state's, like our state arts agency, for example, I'm the chair of the Oregon Arts Commission, so and I know Brian's involved very deeply with WESTAF. How can we provide support in making sure it's about communication and access? That's one way I think about number 17, because if it is about building trust, what are the entities that are already relating to arts organizations of color across our state, and how can they support this mission of relationship and trust building? And transparency, clear communication probably also comes into that milieu, right? How do we how does WESTAF work with the existing systems so that it doesn't feel like something new is coming on top to say, hey, we're doing something better, cooler? That's not what you're gonna say, but you know what I mean. So how can that relationship building, as you're creating these stakeholder conversations, how can we come in and work with you earlier on is something that I'm thinking about.
Mm.
And I guess the last one thing that I keep thinking about is funding is really important. Finances are really, really important. Money is one of the driving forces of how we move things through in this capitalistic society. But I do wonder about how, so I feel like all of us in this room and all the folks you're going to talk to, we have language, we have ways of being in this world that is every day upending the idea of what society should look like. So my curiosity is, how can that strength of our ways of being be magnified through this project? And I think about that as relationships across the states that that WESTAF works with. How can you all as WESTAF, being like the middle, and then we have spokes on the wheels, but how can we build a bigger system down the road in 3 years so that there's a more robust, maybe even a new language? Maybe it's even, how does the money is just happening, but it's really about us and our cultural ways of being and how we are shining together as communities. I mean, that could be an exciting space to keep moving toward. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I see someone else's hand? Anyone else want to respond to that? Any of those questions? The last 5 in the chat, anything stand out?
I guess number 20, how are you addressing your community's needs and interests through your work?
Okay.
And how has your community support directly contributed? I guess just being in community. I mean, truly, with the Nubu art, I mean, you know, definitely, like, I'm a Paiute woman and I definitely work within my community. And there's a lot of things that aren't exactly public that I'm doing as well, you know, like language revitalization. It's not really out there as but it's like a thing that I'm really passionate about and, you know, really working on. But just like, how are we addressing the needs with the community, not just our Paiute community, but the overarching Native American community in Las Vegas? And so it's like, even with our programming, like we have liaisons, you know, with our volunteers who are connecting with like the Indian Center, Her 38 Roses, like all these different organizations, and making sure that we're in communication with them. So there isn't a gap on, you know, what we're doing, and just like, how can we work together? What can we do together? And bridging that. And I think even just the Indian education exhibition we have coming up that opens on May 18th. Here's like all these Native American students in CCSD. I mean, there's only 638 of them, but we're going to be able to have an exhibition with them, and that just feels amazing. So here's like this whole community that's going to be coming through, supporting their youth's art, and that just feels good. And I think it feels really good to just, you know, have that connection. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to learn, and I'm just, with all the questions on the board, I'm thinking about all the different ways. So I think that's why I just kind of like sat quiet for a minute to just think, what is the one?
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that. I mean, I'm hearing that by creating systems that many organizations can be part of might facilitate, you know, kind of more power in an area. Like if you have a bunch of people that need marketing, you can all come together and have that focused on. If you need evaluation, you come together and, you know what I mean? So it feels like one place where you can kind of pool your resources to have a bunch of people be able to benefit is what this is sounding like a little bit. Does that sound right? Am I picking up on what you're saying? Okay. Anyone else have anything they that stands out to them in this last series of questions?
Yeah, I have one like smaller thing that I was thinking about, and that's kind of involving the idea that when you are funding an organization with you know, finances and support in that way, I think it's important that you allow the organization to keep ownership of their work, not take over kind of their mission, and kind of almost like believing that they understand their work better than anyone else, and kind of allowing them that confidence and just that belief in their mission, even though you are supporting them in a financial way, almost kind of like coming with minimal interference from like a larger entity, stuff like that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
A quick question. I'm not sure if this has been decided yet or this is also part of the conversations. But how are the applications review process? Is it going to be kind of community led? Is it more internal? Who has the voice in that room in terms of the review process?
I'd love to throw that back to you, Yasmin, like
Perfect.
all of you, like what would that look like in a way that is equitable, is sound, is good practice?
I love community-led reviews. I think my only thought that immediately comes to mind is, where if you have everyone who's interested apply, who's left to review? It's kind of, I think, without, having too much cross of conflict of interest. But I've been a part of several different review committees, both like local in Oregon and national, and just being able to bring in not just an artist perspective, an administrator perspective, and a community engagement role has been really phenomenal, because just getting to bring up things that other people might not be thinking about. So kind of having that, maybe it's kind of recommendation based. I've done a couple of those as well. Even, having the organization submit of saying, hey, who's, a local community arts leader or community member that you would recommend to be a part of the review process. Even though that might cross a little bit into conflict of interest, but just finding that language. Obviously, I'm always a fan of review panels being paid for their time, especially when considering how many. Oh, then, sorry, my brain is just going into admin mode now. And I'm just like, because then is the review process split up more regionally, or is it in comparison to everyone? Because as we've been talking about, one state or one region, one area of the region might have different responses and kind of preferences. So, are there reviews that are kind of, okay, just Oregon and Washington, and then just these to kind of split them up? Or is it better to kind of review them all together? I know earlier in the questions, there's a question about timeline. I mean, I feel like you all kind of know a little bit more where you are in terms of administrative process, but knowing that statements of interest you were hoping to start receiving in May and June seems really fast. But also, thinking about how we can be of service moving forward, and if there are application questions we can review, or if it does come to a point of being involved, but then it does disqualify you from applying, but there's just more involvement, I will throw my hat out and say I'm interested in further conversations. I always just try to hold the people that are applying, because so much energy and time goes into these. And I wanted to feel, loved and cared for. So, with that, just kind of leaving up, I'm open to seeing how I can be involved further down the line.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And for the spirit of that, really. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. I know in terms of overall, we have 20 minutes left, I guess. So, and I felt that, Suba, and, being overwhelmed, and, Ivana and I spoke about this earlier, this is a lot of questions. And I just want to say, it's our responsibility to find out the answers. And that's where the time crunch is, where we don't want to be spending a lot of time of your time, where we should be going and finding the answers. So we appreciate this time, and I hope that that's helpful. And to Yasmin, I want to make sure if others want to comment anything. At this point, we're in the anything category. But for Yasmin's point, one of the things I've been thinking about is, and spoken to Josh and Lena about, like what it would look like to have, for lack of a better term right now, a steering committee or council or advisory board that is from the beginning, like from May till final reports or whatever those look like, till closing, that we're accountable to, a structure that we as WESTAF are accountable to on a X basis to say, this is what the application's looking like, this is how we formed it, da da da, da. Feedback, insights, da da da, da, obviously paid. All people paid. And then, you know, as we're doing the cohorts and the different things, just that accountability factor coming in. So I really appreciate you kind of throwing your hat. That's the kind of, that was affirming for me for that.
I wanted to add one more thing too that just came to mind when thinking about kind of number 17 in terms of networking and organizing. I mean, one of the beautiful but also scary things is that with WESTAF kind of expanding into this new grants opportunity, you know, WESTAF is going to be hit with more of like, well, what other grants do you have? What other resources? So just also making a very kind of like almost linear presentation of just like, hey, this is the one grant we have. But apart from that, here are the other resources that WESTAF has. Because, you know, I was able to be a part of the leadership cohort last year, and that was phenomenal. And just getting to meet so many people. I had no idea about it until just one lucky newsletter, you know, crossed my path. So just letting folks know that even though, you know, grants from WESTAF are a little limited, we have Tour West, we have this, I think there's one other one that I'm blanking on. But, you know, here's other things that, you know, WESTAF is a part of in terms of the regional arts organizations, and that people, you know, maybe they don't get a grant this year, but be part of the leadership program, build up those skills and reapply, you know, for another cycle.
We've started with, thank you for that. We started with the Leaders of Color Fellowship Program and with the BIPOC Artist Fund, a follow-up information kind of coaching session where we're kind of giving broader feedback to those who weren't accepted, and hey, here's all the other things we're doing, and seriously keep in touch with us. And, you know, some people have taken up and got on my calendar and, you know, giving, you know, coaching and advice and things. So there's absolutely, and we want to continue to model that this isn't the end of the relationship. Yes, we know at the end of the day, you know, cash rules everything around us, unfortunately, but there's the networking, you know, it's all the things from all of our cultures. Now it's called networking, but for us, it's a part of who we are, right? To connect. And so we want to make sure that it's not a closed door because you didn't get the money or whatever, but hey, you know, you never know. You just never know. So I appreciate that. Manny, AB, Fawn, Suba, Gio, anything?
I'm reading what Gio wrote. That's so amazing. Thank you, Gio.
Oh yeah, I just typed up everything. Thank you, Suba.
Thanks for doing that. Yeah, I glanced at that. Thank you.
I'm looking at these questions and I feel like I've actually answered some of these, like within the POC group from last year. And even just thinking about that experience, like having the cohort of all of these different POC artists across the you know, the West, and being able to talk and speak openly about like what the hurdles are, and a lot of this that like really Gio is hitting on too. You know, being able to, you know, have these open conversations. In fact, I forgot what question it was, but I was writing something for one of them, and I'll just drop it in the chat here. But it's really important to have those networking, those groups, you know, because we support each other. We really help each other. And how would we know, you know, what's I don't want to say like what our worth is, but basically, yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions that was brought up during this cohort. This is years back. I don't know if any of y'all were at the Bellagio for the WA conference convention, but it was really amazing. And some of those performing artists were Indigenous performing artists. There's about 25 or so of them. And we were, you know, meeting at the Fifth Street School and just talking and circling up and talking about what the needs of Native artists, yes, yeah, what Native artists are, and being able to have a conversation. And one of the things is we don't talk about money. We don't talk about financing, and it's almost like oh, you don't want to talk about that. Like it's just like taboo, you know, to even talk about. But it's like, no, we need to get past that hurdle. And, you know, one person's like, oh, well, when I was at the theater, I got paid, you know, 5,000 for the performance. And then across the room is just like, what? They ripped you off. You were supposed to get, you know, 12,500. You know, this is what this pays and this is why. Well, at the other theater, you know, just thinking about theater, and I learned a lot about actually the performing arts and that, you know, they're talking about how they do their shows and, you know, what is fair, what is comparable, how, you know, the Native artists specifically were not like just not, you know, getting what they deserve, you know, especially for what the work that they're producing, you know, when it comes to Indigenous arts and performance art, and not just performance, like you know, because I'm a performer, like I dance in the powwow circle and such, but like performance, you know, actually taking a stage and, you know, doing these grand theatrics. So I think that's really important about, you know, being able to be a part of a cohort, having more discussions like these and being able to listen. Suba, Yasmin, Gio, you had a lot of amazing words, you know, about the process and things that y'all have gone through, and I think have a lot to offer with this. One of the questions I have, and I think it was already mentioned earlier, is, you know, will there be a point of juncture where we make a choice if we're going to be on this council or if we're going to apply? Because of course, you know, I would like to apply for this opportunity for the work that we have ahead of us. And so I guess where does that juncture go? And maybe do we just mention other artists that we would think would be good for this? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I love that because hearing Yasmin bring it, I thought, oh, wow, okay, wow. And I wasn't thinking about the application period. I was thinking post award that there's this steering committee probably made up of some folks who didn't get accepted, da 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 da. But maybe it's a both and. Maybe there's an application phase and then the implementation phase, another council. So I'm not here to give answers, but I'm collecting your questions, Fawn. That was really helpful. So thank you for that.
I'd throw in a dream, if that's okay. And maybe it's just the groups that end up getting the grants, or maybe it becomes a whole different project. I don't know. But if we just go with, we've got X number of grants that are awarded and they're followed for 3 years, right? Is that right? Was it a 3-year or am I wrong? It's not a 1-year grant.
It's a 2-year.
2-year
At
grant.
this point, yes.
The dream also is that it becomes 3 years. Okay, that was one. But the other is, you know, is there a way when you think about networking and cohort and building that their stories can be followed, that there's someone, you know, through media, it's, you know, interviews or it's watching, so that at the end of these 2 years, there are X number of stories to be told, because then it becomes a vibrance of the arts organizations of color and what they're doing, so that there's not this constant pressure to show what the organization that receives it doesn't have to do a final report, but the report is being built through photography or videography or documentation, which is all artistry as well. So you're paying for those artists. And so I'm just saying it will be amazing if there are X number of stories that get developed because of this project, to just make this world not feel so lonely sometimes. Because we're all out there doing the work, and sometimes it might feel like we're the only ones who are doing the hard work. But to have these stories could be really lovely. So that's just a dream there.
Yeah, thanks for
Start
that.
your own TV channel, y'all.
There we go. I have actually budgeted for video production documentation, but didn't have the full vision of what you're saying, of that is the report. I love that. Thank you. Gio.
Yeah, just to piggy off of that, because that's something that I feel like is very necessary for the arts, to be able to document work that's being done, especially for like artists of color. I like to think of it as like a myth making type of practice, where you're really documenting what you're doing, and when you have that out, I feel like it makes things a little bit more like real, you know. I feel like if someone sees you doing these things that maybe they didn't think were possible, it makes it that much more possible, and lets other people be able to join in, like have an access point to the arts world, which can be very daunting, you know, depending on what kind of art you're talking about. There's this podcast that I listen to, and they talk about big A art and small A art, and I feel like a lot of us definitely exist in that small A art, where it's more about community building and having a bit of sustainability within this chosen career, which is known not to be as sustainable as people would like. So yeah, it just to have a little bit more like of my views, but I was at a art summit that we had here in Las Vegas some time ago, and a complaint that I heard a lot from other people that were in attendance was that there was an unneeded or unnecessary focus on money, and like how can artists prove themselves through what kind of economies we're creating, right? American for the Arts, they did this whole survey that me through the county, I work for public arts in Clark County, that we participated in, and it was this whole thing that we were showing off during that. It's like, oh look, the arts do bring money, but then at the same time, that was like, why is my existence based on how much money I'm creating? So yeah, I feel like, I don't know where I was going with that, but I felt like it was needed to be shared, you know.
Thanks for that. Well, we are for sure in the last 6 minutes, and I've sent you all the survey. So that housekeeping, I just want to make sure if there's any final thoughts, anything you just need to say. Won't be able to sleep tonight if you don't say it. Please sleep.
Well, I just want to say that it was nice meeting all of you and being in conversation with you. This was, I've never been part of a like roundtable like this, and it was a cool experience, and I would definitely love to stay in touch with you. Suba, I think you had some really cool points that definitely resonated with me as well, and yeah, everybody was, yeah, it was really cool to be in community with y'all, and hopefully we can stay in touch. Thank you. Oh, and thank you to WESTAF for like organizing this. Y'all are really cool, and definitely one of the easier grants to kind of complete. So I'm always letting people know about what y'all do.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you as well. And then our emails were in the Google invite, right? I'm like, so y'all have emails. I'm like, I'll reach out to somebody. I definitely want to learn what's going on in other areas. You know, like Suba says, we're so used to like being in our regions, in our areas. But even as I brought up things and hearing folks being like, oh, we're doing something like that over here. We're doing, you know, ABC. There's so much to learn from each other. So I'm definitely open for more conversations always. And yeah, thank you, Anika, for the space to talk. It's not often that we see funders allow for this type of community conversation. A lot of the times it's very top down. So knowing that we're already starting off from this place for this grant that's going to be offered, phenomenal. I'm excited to share it with folks and let them know that it's going to be happening.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you all for your time. I want to thank Yvonne. The pressure was really on her. I feel like I could sit back and like, you know, think a little bit. So, but as always, a great job, and really appreciate you all as sort of being our test run. Like everything you've said is amazing, and it's our first one. So it's like we're learning along the way. I've dropped the survey in the chat. I've also emailed it to you. Please, please, please. And as other ideas come up, you know, please feel free. You're gonna get the slide deck that we showed now. Actually probably have it because we just added some things. But there we're gonna be uploading this video so that it's gonna be accessible to others. You'll have that link if you want to share it with other people, like, hey, this is what's going on. And the other sessions, if you wanted to come and just be like camera off, fly on the wall, listening what other folks are saying and being an observer, you're more than welcome. So you have those links as well. And I don't think I'm without the slide deck, I don't know what I'm saying. So I'm just kind of going riffing. Yeah, so that playlist is there. Observing another round table, link to the slide deck will be sent to you. There's the survey link. Those are all the things. Yay. Thank you so much to Josh and Lena for your support as well. Like I said, Josh is a part of this sort of foundational group that's trying to imagine this work. And so I can only imagine, you know, the thoughts in his head, because now we're hearing from human beings that we're trying to serve. And we just felt very, very committed to that. This is not going to be another program that we don't ask the people what they would like. So thank you so much. And 2 minutes back. Have a good evening. Debrief tomorrow. Is that it, Lena? All right.